I have just parked my car. I am here in Mason, Ohio to visit Kings Island. This is the first time I've ever been here. There are a lot of people here and it is 9:30 in the morning. The park opens at 10. I'm not used to this. It's a much bigger park than the ones I'm used to, I think, in terms of crowds. Though I guess, I've been to Walt Disney World a lot. But regardless, I'm going to try and ride everything I can. My top priorities are the Beast and Mystic Timbers. So I'm going to try and ride a bunch more coasters and a lot else. This is going to be fun. You're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Hey there, thanks for joining me here on episode 209 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I am your host, Dan Heaton. Way back in 2010, I remember when my first daughter, Elise, was born. A year later, I started to think, we've gotten through this rough time with not sleeping and everything. It would be fun to do a quick roller coaster trip for me and just hit somewhere. And I kind of looked everything up and I wrote down Holiday World, which we ended up doing. And I wrote down Silver Dollar City and Adventureland and all these nearby places. And one of those parks that I wrote down was Kings Island in Mason, Ohio. The Cedar Fair Park with just so many cool coasters and even more now than it had back then with the additions of like Mystic Timbers and Orion and others. And amazingly, we have now reached 2023 and I had still not visited Kings Island. Had a few health issues this summer, and while that was going on, I thought, I just really want to make this trip. I'm going to do this. Finally, on Sunday, September 10th, I drove up the day before, stayed overnight, and spent about nearly a day at Kings Island. And this podcast is my trip report of that visit. And I recorded a bunch of clips while I was there. I'm going to play those shortly and then fill in the gaps at the end. Going to try and make this a kind of lean and mean podcast trip report, give you as much information as I can, not make it on the level of the Disneyland trip report, no 2.5 hours or anything like that. Just a short and sweet look at what I think is a really cool regional park. I mean, I know when you think about kind of the big regional parks, especially as Disney fans that maybe you want to check out if you have a chance, it's like Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, Dollywood, Cedar Point for coasters, and California Magic Mountain. And I think Kings Island should be right up there with those parks. It's a real gem, and I'm going to talk more about why I think that's the case, that Kings Island is so good and why I want to get back there as soon as possible. Hopefully next year, we shall see. It's about a 5.5 hour drive just north of Cincinnati. And so it's not too bad from St. Louis. And if you're in kind of that area or even a little further, I think it definitely might be worth the trip. But before I dive in any further, we are going to go back into the past 3 weeks ago. When I visited Kings Island in Mason, Ohio. Here we go. Let's throw it back to Dan from the past. Take it away, Dan. All right, well, I have to say, getting in was very easy. Security was simple. Scan my ticket, which I'll talk about more later. And now I'm just walking. It's very weird. The park hasn't opened yet, and the park is so empty. And I'm just kind of walking. I know some people possibly get to ride early if they have at 9:30 pass holders. But I'm just heading to the back of the park, to do the Beast, which I know we're still about 15 minutes from opening. I'm not that familiar with how things work. I assume they would have stopped us at some point, but I assume they just stop us actually at the ride. So I'm just walking past everything. There's Orion, there's the backlot stunt coaster, which with its weird helicopters and police cars. Very well themed. I really like the entrance with the Eiffel Tower and the fountains and the shops. Everything just looks really nice. It's big. This is a very big park. The maps don't really do justice to how big it is. Now, it could be tiring by the end of the day, but I will say that I appreciate how just massive everything is. You can hear some music in the background from the diner that I have there, so that's gonna be interesting. They got some old-time cars here. passing a fly ride that spins you around that I will not be riding. And now we get to the point where Dan probably walks the wrong way a lot. But I think I'm heading over towards the Beast over here. But we shall see. But regardless, I'm impressed. My first impressions of this park are that it's very cool. There's a lot to see. It's big. It's just so spacious. There's trees. It also helps that it's like 60 degrees, so it's a perfect day. And I'm excited to ride some rides here, try and get some in before it gets crowded, if it will. I'm not really sure. And just enjoy it as I head towards the iconic Beast. Hopefully get a chance to ride that first and then head for Mystic Timbers, see how that goes, and then kind of go from there. Sounds like it's going to be fun. Trying to escape some loud music here. And I will say that that was awesome. I really didn't watch any POVs as Diamondback goes over our heads, and that is already drawing a bit of a weight, so we're going there next. But I did not watch any POVs or ride videos at all, so I wasn't really sure what to expect, and that was smart. One, they can say that a ride is long, and then you actually experience it, and you're like, wow, this is really long. And I have to highlight that after the second lift hill, where you go down that drop into the helix through the tunnel, wow, that is powerful. I can't imagine what that was like before they did some retracking, if that was a little too rough. I don't know if it was for sure in that area, but very cool. Really enjoyed it. The hype is real, and I can imagine, unfortunately, I will not be here at night, so no night rides for me. And I'm just going to say the legendary Beast is that way for a reason. Sadly, Mystic Timbers is currently down, which is going to be unfortunate. Hopefully, I will keep an eye on that. But we're going to go over here, and we're going to knock out Diamondback here. The weights are starting to build up. It doesn't seem too bad, but I'm sure they're going to build up as the day goes on. I was on the first train of the Beast that left of the day, so that was really cool. And glad I got to do it because that's a real classic, and for a reason. I don't know if it's my favorite coaster ever, but I really enjoyed it, and it's so super cool to have a ride that's so long, and really makes for a fun ride. And now we're gonna go check out Diamondback, see how that is first, and B&M Hyper. It'll be my second B&M Hyper. I did Raging Bull last summer, so I'm still pretty new to them. Curious for this one compared to Raging Bull, which has a lot of turns, how different this will be. But regardless, I'm looking forward to it. And then we're just going to keep riding everything that's open and just have a great day. So didn't really have to wait at all for Diamondback, which was awesome. And it was super cool. I got to say, I don't know if I just don't remember Raging Bull or how it was running at the time, but I don't remember it being that forceful. And especially when Diamondback seems to just pull you, throw you over that first drop. It's something else. I did not expect that at all, that level of force. And but I enjoyed it. It's just that I was also second to last row in kind of that interesting seating layout that they have, and I felt like we were getting pulled through the drop. I have to think about it. I found a little more enjoyable the kind of more twisty setup of Raging Bull than Diamondback, but it's very close. I think once that first drop is cool, and then you have a couple of the second drop same way in the turnaround, but then it does kind of peter out a little bit after that. And so it's not as significant in terms of what you're doing. That last drop looks cool when it hits the splashdown, but not that exciting really. But I thought it was very cool. Unfortunately, Mystic Timbers is still down, but I'm going to sneak into a ride that I know typically has slower capacity and draws people because it's more of a family ride, and that is the formerly named Italian Job, now called the Backlot Stunt Coaster, because it is right here. That is what I'm going to check out next. But I'll say I like Diamondback. I'm glad I got to do another B&M Hyper. Very solid ride, and didn't really have to wait at all. I'm sure it's going to pick up as it goes. Smooth ride too, very smooth, like B&M. And now we're going to check out something completely different here. And I did see fire, so the fire effects are working, which is always a plus. Hopefully some of the other effects on this themed stunt coaster will also be working. So very cool, and well, we'll check it out, and then probably after that, maybe going to try and hit Orion, assuming that Mystic Timbers is still not open. They don't have any info about it, and that to me is a top priority. It sounds like it will open today. They're just not sure when. All right, well, I just did the backlot stunt coaster, which is zippier than I expected. I thought of it more like, oh, this is just a family ride. One, it launches you out of the station in those little cars, and then the helix right off the bat is pretty intense, I have to say. I do appreciate that they had some of the effects. I'm not sure all of them, but they did have the helicopter. It was like it was shooting at you. And then the flame go off in the middle. So kind of a little, I don't know if I would call it a dark ride scene, but a little bit of a scene there as I pass the swings as we head towards trying to find Orion and Racer. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I felt like it's one of those kind of sneaky rides where you think, this is just kind of a family ride or a kid's ride, and you get on, you're like, ooh, goes through the dark, has some nice turns, a few nice little dips. Like I said, used to be the Italian Job. Doesn't really matter. You're still in kind of those Mini Coopers. Everything seems pretty similar, though I suspect that there were some effects that we did not see initially. Pretty cool, and I'm excited that I did it. I know that they have these at multiple parks. I want to say at least 3, if not more. Canada, and then King's Dominion, I believe. So very common, and they're still cooking. And I managed to avoid a long line because you're out there in the sun, and it could have been a lot, but luckily it wasn't too bad. So now we're going to try something that may be a mistake, which is go on my first ever Giga coaster, which this will be a new one. With Orion, as we've entered in kind of this corner with Orion and Flight of Fear. Flight of Fear is one that I had not intended to do because of the wait. I've been told it gets the longest waits in the park and goes really slow, and I just figured, why mess around? Like, it's got a, I know it's indoors and it might be kind of interesting. I haven't heard great things, so my thought is, let's not mess with the one that's going to have a long wait and has slower ride ops. Let's go for the big stuff. And kind of also just not focus on that. And that is what we're going to do. And we'll see how long the line is here for Orion, which doesn't look too bad from what I can see. I'm going to give that a shot. Hopefully I survive. Never done I know there was a question of whether Orion is really a Giga coaster or not. Regardless, it's a big ride. So we're going to give it a shot here and see how it goes. Well, we had quite a change in plans where Orion was closed. It's back up now, so I'm going to head back over there. So I went and did Racer. Was not racing, just rode the red side. Racer's like an airtime machine. It reminds me a bit of Screaming Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis and American Eagle at Six Flags Great America, though that also wasn't racing. So I've yet to experience, Screaming Eagle doesn't race, but similar type of wooden coaster with lots of airtime, up and down, out and back coaster. No crazy helix on this one like American Eagle, but it was fun. It's pretty rough, but not insane. Then I went to the Coney barbecue and had a pretty good pulled pork sandwich with baked beans. I did that also because the ticket that I bought, talk about this for a minute, a daily admission for this day online would have been $50. Not insane. But, if you were going more than one day, you'd go with the season pass, better deal, everything else. And parking would have been $30, which would be $80, of course, plus tax and everything. And then, but they had this special, fun ticket, which was the daily admission. Then they would have parking included and meals for the day. Not drinks, but meals, which normally you pay $34 for that if you want to buy it on its own. And it was $75. So it was less than if I just bought the admission and bought parking. And I don't mean to get too far in the weeds, but that's kind of crazy. That's a really good deal. And I kept thinking, is this really the deal? Now, the food thing set up is you can get foods every 90 minutes, entree and a side. Now, granted, there's only so much theme park food I'm going to eat, especially when going on roller coasters and everything else. But I will say that this was a pretty good meal. I did buy a bottle of water. I think in the future I'm just going to get free water, which you can do with just a cup. I just wanted to get a little more this time. And that's, of course, really exorbitant there. But I did that. Food was pretty good, very solid. And then I will say, after that, I rode Adventure Express, which has some fun theming. It's a mine train coaster. It has some fun theming. And of course, it is well known. I've heard about it years and years and years ago on Coaster Radio. I remember them talking about it. The funny ending where you go up this really well-themed lift hill that seems to be setting up for some sort of big finish to the ride. And you get to the top. Well, it's been around long enough. I can spoil it. And there's nothing. You get to the top and you just go to the station. But there's some nice forces on that. I like that they took an effort. The queue is well-themed. So I appreciate, especially in any type of regional park, when they theme things, regardless of how far they go, they actually take the time to do it. I think it's a fun little ride. Also, there was no wait. We didn't even have a full train. I sat near the front just because I feel like, generally the front's smoother. I'm 47 years old. And that's the one thing that whenever I do this type of trip, I'm very used to like Disney coasters. And sure, something like Everest can still kind of get me backwards. But in general, I do just fine. But one thing I have to remind myself when I do stuff like this is, one, I have to pace myself, especially when the lines aren't long, because I am not a young person. And some of these are pretty intense, even coming off Diamondback, which is not like the most intense coaster I'll ever do, but goes like 80 miles an hour. And I'm not used to riding things that go that fast. And that's why it's going to be interesting with Orion, which I'm going to attempt to do next, where I'm like, okay, luckily it's not a hot day, drink a lot of water, take my time, don't overdo it. And then hopefully I'll be fine. But I figure my chance to ride a Giga coaster doesn't come that often. Hopefully it's now open. But I just got to remember, after this, I may have to take it easy for a while. Like, I'm not going to do Banshee because I found that inverted coasters really mess with my equilibrium. And I'm also the same sort of thing with Invertigo, which is the inverted boomerang. I'm like, yes, I could try and get every coaster credit here, or as many as I could beyond the kids coasters. But there is a limit, and that's why I really hope that Mystic Timbers opens, because that was a top priority, and it's been down all day. So that's unfortunate, but I'm just going to hope for the best there, because that is one that I really wanted to do. That was probably, that or Beast, I would say, is the top priority of the trip, even more than like Orion or Diamondback or anything else. But it's been down all day, so there's only so much we can do. But I've been impressed the fact that I haven't really waited much in line at all. I think the longest wait was like 10 minutes for a racer. This one may take the cake, I think. We're going to check it out. Hopefully I survive all right. And we'll see how it goes. My first thing is I hope that it's working. And then after that, we will see what happens. Cool deal. I'll check in soon. Hopefully I feeling okay. All right. Talk to you soon. Wow, that was awesome. That's my favorite thing I've done so far today, which is not what I expected. Just because I typically like wooden roller coasters a lot more, or else have done more. But haven't done Mystic Timbers yet, assuming I ever get the chance today. But Orion, wow, that opening drop, I mean, whew, so smooth too. I mean, the opening drop is more than 300 feet. And to be able to, I was in row 7, so near the back, there's 8 rows. And wow, just the floater, every time you get there, when you come over that hill and you pause for a moment, it's different than Diamondback, which when you get to the top seems to almost just yank you forward. This is a little more like you pause for a moment. You don't really notice it on the actual incline. You see it from the outside, but getting the chance to ride that, I'm just so appreciative. The wait time, it seemed like there was a line. The wait was like 8 minutes or something. Nothing. This has been so good. I've been so lucky today. The weather is not hot, so it's a little sunny, so I'm feeling a little warm now doing these coasters, but overall it's just been really nice weather and just enjoyed it. The ride hops have all been great. They're moving things in and out. All the coasters I've ridden have at least had 2 trains going. There have been none doing the 1 train approach, which is what you often see at Six Flags St. Louis. But I feel like this is in a different category, not just because of the rides, but also just the approach. And it's a big park. It's a lot less frenetic and just a nice place. I don't mean to keep raving about it, but I've just really enjoyed it so far. And Orion was my favorite so far. And now I'm going to try to figure out where the bat is. I know it's a very long walk, but I want to knock that out since Mystic Timbers is still down. And I probably should stop wandering and I should actually look at a map before I go the wrong direction. But I've heard that the walk is very long, but it is kind of a classic old ride. and I would like to check it out. And I've just been impressed. I mean, the lines for food still aren't long, and it's like right in the middle of lunchtime. There's a lot of people here, but this was a good day to come because it's not nearly as crowded as it might be. Everything's a pretty quick wait. They're moving things along. Haven't had any issues, knock on wood. Just need them to open Mystic Timbers and we'll be rolling along. So now I'm going to find a park map and try to figure out where the bat is. Okay, well, I think it may be time for a break. I felt it. It tells you something when the bat, of all things, is the one that makes me feel the wooziest. And I think it might just be a buildup of the other coasters, or it might just be, like I've told you, this was veering very close to inverted coaster territory. And while there are no loops or anything, the swaying, and also with the over-shoulder restraints, you're really trying not to hit your head. Not my favorite thing. Kind of didn't make me feel great, I gotta tell you. And I think it reminds me, this is 7 coasters in. If Mystic Timbers opens, I'll do that. But we're probably inching more towards doing some slower moving rides. Gonna get some more food in a little bit. Sorry, Banshee. Not gonna happen. Or the Extreme Sky Flyer that I'm walking by. But, I mean, the bat's fine. I do like the setting in the woods. You're right next to where the Great Wolf Lodge is, weirdly enough. As you can hear the Banshee in the background. But it's a long way to go for a kind of painful ride. But I'm glad I did it. Had never done it before. This trip has worked out great so far. Really no complaints of any kind. Beyond the bat being a little painful, but just overall, really went well. And now going to take a break, eat some food, see how the line is for maybe try the Boo Blasters or the Railroad or some of the old man stuff. I think we may have reached that point. The water rides are not open today because while it feels a little warm now, it's still only like 70 degrees or so. Still not too hot, and which is good. Time for a break and to do a few light things. I saw even the Eiffel Tower is down. Come on, Kings Island. But pretty cool overall, and just still having a good time, and glad we could knock that one out and that I survived without too much pain. Well, I lucked out. I walked by Mystic Timbers and I saw a line start to form, and then I realized they were testing, and the person was like, we don't know how long it's going to be. And I was like, you know, this is really the only thing that was on like my list of coasters I wanted to do that I hadn't done. I'm just going to wait this out. And it was probably like 15, 20 minutes, and then they let us in, and I rode it. And oh my gosh, that was the best coaster I've done. I thought Orion was going to win, but it's so relentless. I don't think I'd put it above like the Voyage because it doesn't have those big airtime hills at the beginning. It's more just bam, 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 just takes you out there. It's kind of like the second half of the Voyage is basically what this ride is. But still, man, it's top tier wooden roller coaster, and it does not let you down. I gotta say, that is some serious. It's just, I mean, it's one of those where you read like the stats of like how fast it's going or anything, and it's like, really, that's not really that much. But oh my goodness, like just from that first drop, it just bam, bam, bam. Now in the shed, I won't spoil it, but it was pretty stupid. One, we seemed to wait in there for a really long time and nothing happened. And then when it did, I was like, I appreciate that they tried something. They don't need to even do that. There's some nice theming touches where like the audio is going up the hill and it slows down, it speeds up and slows down. And so I appreciate they're doing that with the shed. It's a little hokey, but I think you could easily kind of joke about it. But I think that it's really cool that they did it. And I gotta say, I think after doing this trip, I'm gonna have to start thinking about, I haven't updated my favorite roller coasters in a while. I had a top 5. I think between this and Great America, I could probably make it a top 10 now, given just those, Holiday World, all the others. And I gotta say, Mystic Timbers and Orion are definitely gonna be contenders for this list. The Beast, maybe. Not Diamondback, but it's still cool. But man, Mystic Timbers I'm glad that it worked out, because it's a real gem. And I think that's it for me for coasters. I'm gonna go ride the railroad in a minute here. Just chill, take it easy, maybe get some type of dessert, and then start thinking about leaving to go back to St. Louis. But yeah, I'm really appreciative that I was able to ride it. Well, I probably made a mistake in that well, first of all, I rode the railroad, which was a lot of fun. No mistake there. It is interesting that it only goes around a small part of the park. I'm curious to read more about the history of that, but it does give you some really cool views of Mystic Timbers, and it stops at the water park, which is not currently open, given that we're after Labor Day, and then just does some really cool things there right at the end, and it's just relaxing. Has that old school railroad feel. It's been around since the early 70s. I think it's awesome. I love it. Yeah. Then I decided I was going ready to leave. So I was like, well, I'd like to do one more thing. Why don't I, let's do the Shooting Dark ride, the Boo Blasters. It reminds me a lot of those Scooby-Doo rides. I don't know, I think this maybe used to be Scooby-Doo. I'm not sure. It's not themed right, I mean, it's themed, but it's not an IP right now. And it basically was a lot of fun. The downside was not the ride itself. It's well themed. It's kind of that old school, I believe Sally, I'm expecting, made it. And it was super fun. The downside was that the wait was deceptive, where you walk into this room with a bunch of back and forth queues. I timed it. It was 26 minutes, which, doesn't seem that bad. But when you're in that room with a lot of screaming kids and everything else, it was like, oh, this is a lot. This is a lot to take. And so that was the only downside there. I did enjoy it. I'm glad I waited for it. I wanted to do something. I mean, I started out the day with 8 straight coasters and then did the railroad. And I figured, let's do one thing that is not a coaster beyond the railroad. Let's do this Shooting Dark ride. It was the only thing in the Planet Snoopy area. I considered doing the Race for Your Life Charlie Brown log flume, but that line got really long because it got warm and sunny. It wasn't open in the morning. I love log flumes, but also solo log flumes are a little weird. So, because either you're with people, which is weird, or you're in this log flume by yourself. So, but I would have done it if it was less crowded, but also kind of winding down, because remember, I still have to drive back to St. Louis, which says it takes 5.5 hours. It took almost 6 yesterday with stops and everything and a lot of construction. So that was a lot. So I'm anticipating 6 hours to get back. And so I'm leaving here and it's like 3:30. The park's open till 8, I believe. But it's 3:30, which is not that late for here, but I've been here since 9:30. So a good 6 hours, which is only 2:30 Central, so that's good. But you think about it, it's going to be 6 hours. But I got to say, I got to make a big pitch. Even if you pay $33 for the meal plan, but a lot of it comes with season passes and everything else. But getting it with this pass, I mean, I grabbed food for the road. I grabbed chicken fingers and these Sidewinder fries. That barbecue place has really good food. But I just kind of ate a little bit of it and wrapped it up. Because my thought is like, I'll eat some of it here, but not all of it. And then I got something for a few hours down the road. I don't know if that's how they plan it, but I mean, the food that I would have gotten, because theme park food is so expensive, you're talking $15, $18 each meal. And, I bought a bottle of water, got a soda once, and then just got a water here at the end. You can get water cups everywhere. They're little cups though, but you can do that. It is getting warm here. I gotta say, I would not want to be here on a 95-degree day. Whew, that would be brutal. Because it's like 78 and I am sweating like crazy. But had a great day. I'm going to talk about it more when I get back. But I did record a lot of things, as I'm sure you're hearing. Hope you enjoy it. I had a great trip. Did all the coasters I wanted to do that I thought I could do. And can't wait to talk about it a little more when I get back to St. Louis. Welcome back. Well, I just have to say overall, I enjoyed Kings Island a lot more than I expected. I had heard amazing things. But also, too, I kind of have a vision a bit of a coaster park as being something where there's just all this massive steel and it doesn't have as much heart to it, which was not the case with Kings Island. It has kind of a similar, just friendly vibe that I've experienced at Silver Dollar City. It's a very different park with a lot of typical amusement park rides, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Because at our local Six Flags St. Louis, a lot of the things we used to do when I was young, like bumper cars and old-time cars and an octopus and some of the kind of standard rides are gone, and they're still at Kings Island, and they have a lot of charm, including like a carousel and the water rides. There's just a lot more. I barely scratched the surface of what's there, and that's what I was thinking. Like when I left, I thought, oh, maybe I'll come back here in a few years. And as I thought about it more, I was like, I kind of want to come back next year for several reasons. One, my daughter Etta, who's 10 now, has expressed more interest as we've gone along in coasters. She's done a decent amount of them at Disney, at Disneyland and Walt Disney World, and handled them all pretty well. And I'm not going to take her on Orion probably, but also there are multiple coasters at Kings Island that I did not do that are more kid based. Plus, they're opening a new coaster, Snoopy Soapbox Racers, next year, which will be very cool. So there's a lot that she can do, even that I haven't done yet. Plus, a lot of the flat rides and the water rides. And I suspect she would be interested in doing at least like Adventure Express and Backlot Stunt Coaster, possibly, and Racer. So some of the ones that I did that were not as extreme. And then if she gets really daring, we start to venture into the Beast or Mystic Timbers territory. Would not take her on the bat. I am not messing with that. So there's a lot to do beyond just what I did. I only did 8 coasters and 2 other attractions, but I was only there till 3:34 in the afternoon because I knew I had to make that drive home. In hindsight, they were not open on that Saturday. If they had been open, I would have considered doing a 2 days, whether I don't know if an annual pass or just a 2-day pass is a better deal, arriving that afternoon on Saturday, spending, 4 hours in the park, whatever, and then doing the similar times I did now. And I think I would have accomplished a lot more and just been able to relax and possibly have night rides, depending on how late they were open, which would have been awesome on a few of the attractions, like the Beast and Mystic Timbers. But even so, given the amount of time I was there, I was a little concerned with crowds just because I don't know. I know they draw better than some regional parks, but it's also so huge. That's the crazy thing. The park is 364 acres, which is really big for a regional park, I have to say. It is one of those where I came down and we finished and I thought, is this as big as Epcot Center? It's actually technically bigger than Epcot. Epcot's 305 acres. Now, some of the space that is included in this for Kings Island is likely the coasters that go way back in the woods. So I'm not sure the walking area was bigger, but that gives you an idea. We're talking like Epcot size. There's not a big giant lake in the middle. You have the water features at the beginning by the Eiffel Tower, but so it seems even bigger. Well, I want to dive right into things I didn't do that I barely referenced. And it's not because I thought they were bad. In case you're thinking of going, this would be helpful. One is Banshee, which I have heard great things about. This is an inverted coaster from B&M, which opened in 2014. And this is a newish inverted coaster. This is not, you think of like the Batman clones and those really compact, intense coasters where you're constantly just flipping around in circles and you don't know where you are, but it's very small. This is different. This is a 150-foot drop, which is quite much for an inverted coaster, and almost goes 70 miles an hour. I didn't do it because I found, at least with Batman and some others, that inverted coasters don't do great for me. But I have heard that this is a top flight coaster with some really strange elements and interesting elements. It has 7 inversions. It's like over 2.5 minutes long. And the lines weren't too bad. I think I could have done this with waiting like 20 minutes. But the fact that I had to drive home too, the last thing I wanted to do is start to feel gross and then have to get in a car and drive after riding something like this. But this is the one that I'm kind of kicking myself just because it's so unique. And I thought, well, maybe if I did it and then just really chilled for a while, it might have been worth it. I think it would probably have been no worse than how I felt after riding the Bat. But I felt like the Bat would be less intense just given its stats and everything. And it probably is because I've heard this is very intense. But Banshee is one you want to check out if you're a coaster enthusiast and really want to hit the top coasters. I would say top coasters in the park. For me, my 3 favorites were Mystic Timbers, Orion, and the Beast. But I would say do those 3. Make sure to do Diamondback and do Banshee as kind of a top 5 if you're a coaster enthusiast or someone who just wants to be one and you want to hit these top rides. I mean, yes, there are others, but those are the 5 big ones I think that are really essential. Another one I didn't do is Invertigo, which that was an easier decision. An inverted boomerang, it's like, 1, I'm inverted, and 2, I'm going forwards and backwards. This is done by Vekoma, and I've heard it's extremely intense. Like, not something you want to take lightly. And that's one where I'm like, oh no, over the shoulder restraint. It's only a minute and a half, but it only has 3 inversions, but this was not a tough decision. This is one that generally does not show up near the top. You'll have lists or YouTube rankings of the top attractions at Kings Island or top coasters ranking them. This one will be like 12 or 10 or 11 out of 14. And that says something about Invertigo, but it is another one that if you really want to check out everything, if you love boomerangs, if you love inverted boomerangs, this is something for you. And I also didn't do Flight of Fear, which is the indoor coaster, and that's another one where it just came down to lines. I had heard Flight of Fear was extremely popular. It was once themed to the Outer Limits, actually, for the first 4 years of its existence. But it's in that same Area 72 area of Orion, has quite a few inversions. I've heard it described as a spaghetti bowl done by Premier Rides. And while I love the idea of indoor coasters, and especially with a launch, reminds me a little bit of how you have a launch on Rock and Roller Coaster. And this is only a 1 minute ride, and it's not that anything against it, but once I walked by and saw those giant lines, here's another tip about Kings Island. They have the app with the wait times, but I found them to be very unreliable. I mean, at the beginning of the day, I am standing in line for the Beast. There are like 5 or 10 people in front of me, maybe 10 people behind me, and the app comes up and says 40 minutes. Now, that's not very helpful. When I went to ride Backlot Stunt Coaster, there was about 10-minute wait at most. The app said 45 minutes. It just seemed to be way off and not that reliable. Maybe it did help with me knowing Mystic Timbers was down, so they do tend to do a good job at least with showing when something's down. But Flight of Fear would say a time, but I didn't know whether to trust it because I would look at the outdoor queue and just see a mass of people. And I'd heard this is the attraction you need to ride first, and I didn't because I didn't want to take any chances with not getting to ride like the Beast and Mystic Timbers, which again I didn't ride to the afternoon, and Diamondback and some of the others. So I just decided to set this aside, but it is one that in the future, I don't think I would take Etta on, but at some point I would like to check out, given that I know it has a pretty cool queue with a big spaceship and everything, and just some fun elements, and indoor coasters are rare and usually a great time. So it is one I would like to check out at some point in the future, but I wasn't able to this time. On the other side of the spectrum, I should also mention several of the kids' coasters that I did not do. One of them being the Woodstock Express, which actually looked like one that I would not feel that weird doing. But again, I was kind of there by myself, so the last thing I wanted to do is spend a bunch of time in the Planet Snoopy area. But this actually opened with the park in 1972 by Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters, but also did other rides like Screaming Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis. This one, it's for kids. It only goes 35 miles an hour and has a 30-foot drop, but has a lot of history. So it might be something that would be worth checking out. And this is one I would like to check out in the future. Another one that doesn't look that exciting because it's inverted, but again, looks like a very relaxed inverted coaster, Flying Ace Aerial Chase. I think I would do fine with it. It actually was themed to the Rugrats for a while as the Rugrats Runaway Raptor. And it's also in the Planet Snoopy area and, doesn't have really much of a drop or anything. You're about 50 feet off the ground. It's a suspended family coaster. It goes 26 miles an hour. Nothing much to say about this. This, I think, though, is a great introduction to suspended or inverted coasters. I think it would be great to take Etta on this one, but I did not ride it myself. They also have one more that is really a kiddie coaster, the Great Pumpkin Coaster by E&F Myler Industries. This one is one of those, when you think of like a kiddie coaster that barely goes anywhere and you're squished in. I was not going anywhere near this, but this is another coaster there that, I don't even know if maybe for the credit, if I was going to do that, if I could go with Etta, but I'm not sure. There's not much to it beyond that. I would say I did not go at a time when water rides were a big deal, though I did see as the day got sunnier and warmer, especially when I was waiting in line for Mystic Timbers, Race for Your Life Charlie Brown, the aerodynamics log flume. That is one that I thought about doing, but like I mentioned on the clip, I just, going solo on a log flume always seems a little odd. But they have a few other rapids rides that were not open. They have Congo Falls, which is a shoot the chutes ride. That's another one that is good on a hot day. And then they have Whitewater Canyon, which is a cool-looking river rapids ride but that was also closed when I was there, which makes a lot of sense. But it has some nice theming, and it is the type of ride that they have used frequently. And they also have one at Canada's Wonderland and King's Dominion. So it is not just at Kings Island, but still has been there since the mid 80s. And I like raft rides. I always get a little skeptical, but I've done two recently, Mystic River Falls at Silver City and, of course, Grizzly River Run. Enjoyed both of them quite a bit and got really soaked in Mystic River Falls. Grizzly River Run wasn't too bad, though I made up for that by getting soaked on Splash Mountain. You can listen to the Disneyland Trip Report if you want to hear more about that. We're going to stay focused here on Kings Island. So before I move away from their attraction roster, I just want to say that what I did only is a small indication of the types of rides. There are also a lot of cool flap rides. I want to spotlight Delirium, which is the giant frisbee. It's one of those where you look up and you just see this thing swinging back and forth really far off the ground. This one goes 76 miles an hour. Wow, that is something possibly to check out. There's also Drop Tower, which is an intimate gyro drop, 315 feet tall. It used to actually be themed to the movie Drop Zone with Wesley Snipes, which I have seen. I think I'm getting it confused with Point Break. I was thinking Gary Busey might be the villain of that one, but I think I may be wrong. I'm not going to check. I'm just going to say it, and it's probably incorrect. There are also some nice shows. I did not see any of the live shows at all, but you may want to check those out, especially if you're there for a longer time or with family. And I want to give a big spotlight to the Planet Snoopy area, which I think it was very crowded, so I didn't spend much time, but I appreciate they have so many attractions. A lot of them by Zamperla, and they did not look as cheap as the Bugs Bunny area that is at Six Flags St. Louis. They also have a Windseeker, which I've still never ridden a Windseeker. It's really high. It just makes me a little nervous. I like swings, but usually when you're like 40 feet above the ground, not 300 or something. And they have they also have an extreme sky flyer, which is you pay kind of like a sky coaster and fly around. But you can look up plenty more about all these attractions if you're planning on making the trip to Kings Island. And Soak City, the water park there, was not open, but that also has some things that you might enjoy. I'm going to mention, too, where I stayed. I stayed at are a bunch of similar priced hotels that are all about 10 minutes from Kings Island. They're all at a similar exit. They're easy to find. And the reason I stayed at this La Quinta Inn is that it was about $30, $40 cheaper. And the deal I found, which, it was through booking.com. It was actually cheaper than their site. And it had been rated okay, like 3-star hotel, 7 out of 10 on most things. I will say it served my purpose as far as convenience, meaning that it was super easy to drive to Kings Island. And there also, if you're looking for something to eat, I got in and I had not eaten yet. So I went just to Chipotle and it was like 9 at night and it was not hard to find somewhere to eat nearby. So I will say that the hotel worked out fine for me. They had free breakfast, which is also nice when you're trying to go to a park, but it is definitely showing its age. That a really slow moving elevator and everything just looked a little worn down. The guy at the desk was not particularly friendly, and there was nothing particularly bad about it. My room was clean, but everything just seemed pretty dated. So if your primary indicator is price, I think it will work out just fine. I'm kind of kicking myself that I maybe should have spent another, it was one night, maybe another $20 or $30 for the next step up. There are a bunch of different chains there that might have been a bit better, but you're kind of trying to keep the price fairly down overall for this trip. And I mentioned the ticket too. I want to talk about that a little bit because, I was paying out of my own pocket and I originally looked at it. It was $50 to buy tickets online. From what I've heard, buying at the gate is much more expensive. So you definitely want to buy online. Like the difference, like 50 versus 80 or something crazy like that. So the ticket was $50, but then I noticed that you could get this special ticket with parking, which would have been $30. That's right there is $80 before tax or fees. But you get it with parking and the meal plan for $75. And I went, yes, I want to do that. And, they have, of course, extra fees, convenience fee and all that. So it was like $83 is only what it cost. But if you think about it, right there, the ticket and parking were basically that. And if I was ordering the parking online, which I was going to do, I would have still paid that same fee or the ticket. So really, you're getting the meal plan for free. And if I was just buying the meal plan, like if I decided for some reason I was being dropped off or I didn't have a car to park or for, let's say there's one person that is parking the car and other people that aren't. You could buy the ticket and then the meal plan for the meal plan is $33. So 50 plus 33. So that's probably what you would do because you obviously don't need to get parking for every person. But actually, it'd be cheaper to buy the other ticket. So you probably just buy it just to get the meal plan. And I want to say, I think that was it's weird to say good value when you're paying that much and I wasn't there for the full day. But given all that I was able to do and just the quality of everything there and the fact that I easily could have stayed, I think the park was open from 10 to 8. So I could have stayed for 4+ hours from that. And the idea of the meal plan is you're able to get an entree inside every 90 minutes. And most of the restaurants open 11 a.m. At least what I saw, each restaurant I went to did accept it. Now, so for when I left, I probably still could have gone 2 more times. It sounds ridiculous because already I went 3 times. And in the time I was there, I did not need to eat 3 meals. But it's one of those things where it's like, one, I was about to hit the road for like 5 hours. I ended up eating enough where I didn't stop for a meal on the way home. So that was really helpful for speed and for money. So I made good use of it. But I would say I didn't test that much of the food. I had, a pulled pork sandwich from the barbecue place and then with baked beans. And then later I had some chicken fingers with fries and a few things like that. And all of them were great, though. They were definitely better than your typical amusement park food. And I want to say, at least in terms of the food I had, was better than comparable counter service at Disney. And again, I'm talking like Columbia Harbor House chicken nuggets versus the chicken fingers I had here, is what I'm kind of comparing. This was much better than that. The pulled pork here, was probably on par with Regal Eagle or something like that. It's not the best barbecue I've ever had, but it's very steady. And the fries, I don't know what seasoning they put on them, were great. So that is what I tried. I did buy 1 bottle of water. You can get free cups of water basically everywhere. And then got 1 soda. Each of those were about $5. I didn't have to do that. I could have got small cups of water the whole time. There were a few places where they had a sign that they were very nice. That sign specifically said no free water here. Even one of the rides I was on, the announcer there was even saying, make sure you get free water and stay hydrated. So this is something that Kings Island is pushing. It's not okay, I guess if you do it, I'll get it for you, which has happened to me at other parks. Here, they were very nice about it. I didn't get that many, but I got enough where I made sure that I was staying hydrated as much as possible, which is good when you're going on these big coasters. But I want to make a big pitch for the meal plan, and I know I did not want to carry around this big souvenir cup, even though it's very easy. They have bins for them. You can put them in there before you get on the coaster. I just didn't want to mess with it. But that's probably an even better deal, especially if you're going to go there and you are someone that drinks a fair amount of soda, or even you could fill it up with water or whatever, especially on a hot day. I think it would be even more important because those little cups of water aren't going to get you very far when it's 90 degrees. And that is something I felt like when the park hit about sunny and 75, I was like, oh boy, it would be brutal to be here at 95-degree weather or even 85-degree weather. So I would say if you're planning to go, be ready. Try to find a time, go in May or June or maybe at the end of the year when it's not as hot. Go in the middle of August when it's 90. There's a reason a lot of people end up staying at the water park at those times because it's just going to be very challenging. If I was to make an overall pitch for Kings Island, I would say it's not as imposing as somewhere like Cedar Point or Magic Mountain or somewhere that's just these massive steel coasters. It has a little more charm to that. And this is nothing against Cedar Point. I have not been there. I know it's sad. I hope to do it at some point in the near future. It has so much charm. It feels like a local park, but taken to this extreme next level. And I say that because the ride ops were just so good. You could see it, especially on the big coasters where those trains were just flying in and out. Orion was the best example where there were a decent amount of people in line, but it went so quickly. I was like, oh, this is going to be bad. Set my stopwatch and I waited in line 9 minutes. And I think that was common throughout, even the way that when people were finally going into Mystic Timbers, the way they handled that I thought was done very well. So the ride ops and the employees there just seemed to really care for the park. And the people that are there seem to care for it. So much clapping at like the end of every coaster. People just so thrilled to be there. I noticed this when I rode Orion. I couldn't even help it going down that big hill. I was like, oh my gosh. And the people next to me had just arrived, and everyone was just like, wow, this is something. Same deal with Mystic Timbers, where there was a guy who had like a Cedar Point shirt on, and I just assumed was like a coaster expert and had been there a zillion times. And I was like, yeah, first time on. And he's like, me too. And we both were just like, whoa, that was great. Plus we had to sit there for a while before we went into the shed, which I don't know if that's normal, but just that overall vibe of happiness. You have that ride to happiness, that idea. But I experienced this at Silver City, but I was a little more surprised by it here just because, having no experience with this park, I didn't realize it was going to be like that. It was going to feel so friendly. And that's not always the case with a lot of amusement parks. And yes, Disney parks can feel friendly. Universal can, though Hollywood, I would not say felt that way. But there's just so many people and it's so expensive and there's so many moving parts to it. Again, I went on a slower day. I think it'd be very different possibly to visit Kings Island on one of the busiest days of the year. But going there on a fairly slow day near the end of the year, and the park had been closed the previous few days due to a special event and was getting ready. This was the last normal operating day before they started their Halloween events. So I think there was a vibe kind of like the last day of baseball season or something before the playoffs, where people were just like, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm happy I got to go before this closed. It hadn't been open. So this is cool. We all get to go. And the same feeling was spread across most of the employees there. I mean, there was the guy who was standing there and had to tell people that Mystic Timbers were closed, and I asked him when he thought it'd be open, and he was a little standoffish and not super friendly, but I understand. I was probably the 95th person that asked him when the ride was going to open. Actually, I'm probably way undershooting. It was probably like the 500th person. I should also mention the soundtrack. There's a lot of original songs, or it's not the typical theme park music. I didn't hear like Who Let the Dogs Out while we were there or something. I mean, they do have an interesting thing near the Beast and Diamondback where they have like bluegrass versions of 90s alternative songs, which, I mean, you heard some stuff like Slide by the Goo Goo Dolls, which was kind of interesting, but just a lot of interesting versions. I wish I had written down. I know there's some Spotify playlists out there and some more information, but I wish I had thought more and remembered about some of the other songs. I remember standing in line. I was like, this is a very strange version of the song. I want to say it might have been by Green Day, but I'm not sure if my memory's a little hazy. But I remember thinking, oh, this is an interesting way to start the day. But I also just want to spotlight my favorites of the day. I expected the Beast to be great, but still going through the woods and just the way that works is still something very special. And I love the way they've fixed some track and taken care of that ride so well. I was a little intimidated by Orion, but I'm so glad I did it, especially after doing Diamondback, which I held a little intense on the intense side for me. I was like, if this is taken to the next extreme, it might be too much for me, but it's actually the opposite, where I felt like it was smoother. It's a more recent coaster. Very recent, actually, the most recent big one in the park. And I felt like it was so smooth and so comfortable and just so much fun. And that's the thing. When coasters are done well by these parks, they don't make you sick. That's the trick, I think, where if you can find a way to make a coaster that goes 90 miles an hour and has a drop that's over 300 feet and doesn't make you feel queasy, you're winning. Mystic Timbers, so much airtime, just constant, intense, takes you get done, you're like, I feel great. I could do that again. I compare that to like the Boss at Six Flags St. Louis, which shakes you the whole time. You get done like, oh, that was an experience. Not the worst coaster, but definitely a different experience. Racer reminded me a little bit of Screaming Eagle, but also a little smoother because they've done some track fixing. So there's just some interesting comparisons there. And I like some of the goofy rides, whether it's Venture Express with that silly lift hill at the end, or even Backlot Stunt Coaster, which starts with what to me was one of the most intense elements I experienced of the whole day, that helix something where I was like, oh my gosh, there's all these little kids getting on that ride. And I was like, whew, these kids are tough. I'm sad that Racer wasn't racing, hence the name, but it was still fun to ride that. Also rode that with a young guy who said he went to college nearby, who's just going by himself to try out some coasters. We get done. He just said, well, that was very wooden. It's like, yes, it was. That's a very wooden coaster, I will say. And I also say that I noticed going there solo that there were quite a few people that I hate to stereotype, but looked like coaster enthusiasts who were going there, whether on a credit run or just because they love the park. So there really was no stigma to going there solo, which you just never know. I mean, most of the time I had my own row, and even when I didn't, it was fine. There was never any like super weirdness or whatever. And I always tried to make sure that it seemed like sometimes they would put you in and say, you sit with that person. But if I had an open row, I would wait for the next one or whatever, depending on the crowds. But visiting solo, sure, it'd be fun. And that's to say, the next time I went, I'd go there. I probably would want to go with friends or family. But getting there for the first time, there is a benefit to not having anyone not want to ride something or whatever. I'm just going to do what I want to do and have fun with it. So I think it was a very successful day trip. And I will say again that I can stress just the care at this park and how the entrance is beautiful with the Eiffel Tower, which I did not get to go up in. It was closed most of the day. We have the Eiffel Tower and the fountains and everything else. It's super cool. And getting the chance too, they don't stop you like by the entrance. Like I said, they let you, and being able to just wander the park. I don't know how early it opened, but I was there at like 9:30, like 30 minutes before it opened, just wander the park and ultimately end up at the Beast and get to see it kind of that way was really special and super cool. So I'm glad I got to do that. Can't wait to get back there. I feel like I unlocked something that I didn't realize how cool it was, even though I've heard about Kings Island for years. But until you're actually at a park like that, you don't really experience it. And I'm sure it's also the first time I've gone since they bought them. I've been to like Knott's and others before they bought them, but to a Cedar Fair park. And I'd like to get to World of Fun soon. But I know you can be like, Dan, really? You've never been to Cedar Point or Carowinds or so many others? But no. And so I know that Kings Island is just one park. So I don't want to make assumptions, positive or negative, about anything with Cedar Fair. But pretty great first impression. That's all I got to say about Cedar Fair and what they did with this park. And even just, I'm just going there by myself. I like the fact that I'm wearing cargo shorts and I'm able to like put my phone in like the pocket that has Velcro and stays there. And they specifically say that on the signs, if you have cargo shorts in a pocket like that you're fine. I found that very nice because I always get nervous about, am I going to have to like do something weird there? So that was nice too. So everything worked out very well. And that's it, really, for my thoughts on Kings Island. I would love to hear if you've been to Kings Island, what your experience was, or if you are thinking of going and have more questions, definitely send me an email, dan@tomorrowsociety.com. You can always send me a message through any social media platform, Twitter, that's Tomorrow SOC, Instagram, Facebook. I'm also on other more recent things like Threads and Blue Sky and some of those upstarts that we're kind of waiting to see, if any, what is going to kind of take over. Also have a YouTube channel where I've already posted a short of the final splashdown that you have at the end of Diamondback. I'm also doing a review of Kings Island that actually may be up by the time you hear this. If not, it'll be soon after. And planning to post a few more videos. I shot quite a bit on my trip and just plan on continuing to post. I've already posted a lot on Instagram and other services about that experience. And it was just a great time, and I'm glad I got to do it. And part of the way that I'm able to do this is through your support. If you enjoy this podcast, if you like hearing my interviews with Disney Imagineers and other experts on theme parks, go to Patreon. Go to patreon.com/tomorrowsociety. You can get access to some really cool perks, including bonus episodes. I'll send you a fun package when you join with a pin and a membership card and everything else. And it's just a small way to help keep the show going and pay for the small little expenses that come up with doing a podcast and help to just keep this show moving forward. You can also make a one-time contribution, buy me a Dole Whip at tomorrowsociety.com/Dole Whip. And like I said, send me a note. Let me know what you think. It's always awesome to hear from you. The music for this podcast was written by Adam Hookey, performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Thank you so much for listening to this Kings Island Trip Report. I would love to hear what you think. A lot more fun interviews and other episodes on the way, including my episode about improving Spaceship Earth, which is coming later this month. Thank you so much for listening once again, and I will talk to you again next time.